So if you are, just to get started, a few housekeeping issues. This is being recorded as of right now. Hang on one second. Okay. This is being recorded so that it can be shared online after the event is over. Thank you for everybody who is participating today and who called in or is here to watch. So today is the release of our 5th annual traffic stop study here in the state of Connecticut. We're joined by most members of the Connecticut Racial Profiling Prohibition Advisory Board. Just to share, this is my first time sort of navigating this, so just thank you all for bearing with me. I'll share the agenda for today's event. Hopefully you're able to see. The agenda will get started. I'm going to ask in a moment Chairman Dyson to make some open comment, introductory comments, welcome comments. I'll then pass it over to Marc Pelka, Undersecretary for Criminal Justice Policy and Planning at OPM. We'll do a brief presentation on the report findings. I'll ask a number of members of the advisory board to share some comments with us. We'll take media and public questions at that point, if there are any, and then we'll get to closing remarks. Just know that as a member of the public or members of the media, if you have a question, if you can write in the chat box, that would be most helpful. And then we can either call on you and you can ask your question, or you can write the question in the chat box and we'll respond. Either way is fine. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to make sure, go through who I know we have on the line. So I've got Amy Bepko from Chief State's Attorney. I've got Andrew Clark. I've got Chief Fusaro, Dr. Laurencin. I've got Marc Pelka, Chief Drive, Robert Flynn from DOT, Shannon Trice from NHTSA, Steve Gutenberg, ADL, Steve Hernandez from the legislature, Tamara Lanier. Tamara, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, we can. I've got Werner as our panelist, just as our callers. I've got a number of callers. I know we've got Bill on the line, Connecticut State Police, Tanya, Hughes, Mike Gailor, Andy Friedland. We have somebody new that called in. I don't have your name.
George Wells from CHRO.
Great. Thank you, George. I'm going to write down.
Yep, hi.
Hi. All right. Okay, so I think at this point, before we jump into the report itself, I am going to kick it over to Chairman Dyson. If you're there and you can hear us, I'm going to kick it over to you to sort of kick us off. Just if we can, if you're a panelist, if you are able to mute yourself until it's your time to talk, that would be helpful, because I don't have control over being able to mute panelists so that we don't get feedback.
So that also includes phones too, for those calling in.
Yeah, the folks calling in, please don't be offended. I am going to mute you. You can unmute yourself. But for now, I'm going to mute everybody but Chairman Dyson. Marc, are you able to just mute yourself? We're getting some feedback.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. No, thanks. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to kick it over to Chairman Dyson to get us started.
Hey, good morning to all of you. You can probably tell this is going to be quite an adventure, not just only doing the annual report, but the fact that we have a new way of meeting, and this new way of meeting puts me at somewhat of a disadvantage. I can't see faces, I can't see expressions, body language is lost, and I don't know who wants to do what, and I'll need help in doing that. So this is quite an adventure that we're about to undertake here, and that is trying to establish among us, just us, a new way of communicating, you know, and needless to say, it's going to be quite an adventure. So I'm glad you're here participating. I'd really like to see everybody, you know, just to see how you're doing. It's cutting off for me a means by which I ascertain how well people may or may not be doing. And I need that. I need that to know how I am going to get through, and I don't mean just getting through the meeting, but getting through understanding what it is that people may feel and about what's going on. So it's an adventure. So I needed to share that with you. And what I'll do is that I'll try to make sure, for one thing, we get this meeting done, and hopefully without any extended period of time. I didn't hear Cheryl's voice, so I'm going to Miss Cheryl. I don't know where she is here.
I'm here.
Hey, Cheryl, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. I got kicked out, but now it's let me join again.
Okay. And I know there are other people. Michael, I know that you're here, and I'm glad that you are. And Chief Ripers, and that Beck is here, and
I'm here. I'm sad that you don't have a camera, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. What I'll do here is that we're going to hear from Marc, right, Ken?
Yes, a couple of things. One is, Cheryl, could you just mute yourself? And then at this point, thank you, Cheryl. We're going to turn it over to Marc Pelka, Undersecretary, Criminal Justice Policy and Planning, Office of Policy and Management, which is where this project resides. So, Marc, take it away.
No, thank you very much, Ken, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Dyson, for your opening remarks. Although we couldn't see you, sir, I want to share that, as always, your words resonate through my entire self. I can remember vividly how it felt to be a staffer in the legislature back in 2003, and to hear you speak on the floor of the House, Appropriations Committee, at events around the state. And every time I hear your words, they remind me of the greater calling and commitment, and the greater need I think I feel to grow, to do more, to fight for the values, the principles, the vision that you have for communities across our state, for municipalities across our state, for our state as a whole. You are the beacon that really guides us through this process. And I feel I am standing on the shoulders, by even having a minute to speak on this topic, I'm standing on the shoulders of the people who have done this work. And I think the best, most appropriate thing for me to do with this opportunity is to recognize, thank, express gratitude, and really honor the work of the members of the advisory board, the Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy, the stakeholders, the members of the public who have made this all possible. Where we stand today on May of 2020, I think feels like this is a high point on a mountain. I don't know if you would feel it is a summit of the mountain, but I think where you all must feel that you are rising and rising and rising toward that summit. And I can only imagine how that must feel for those who did the work back in 1999 when the Alvin W. Penn Racial Profiling Prohibition Act was first enacted, to look at where we are now, where we have a new report that's come out, thanks to the incredible hard work done by all of you on this conference. And I echo the chairman's remarks that it is disappointing that an occasion deserving of a convening is not possible because of the public health emergency that our state and our country are responding to. And I think acknowledging that public health emergency is necessary to think about the impacts that emergency has had on the constituents that are part of this effort. I think about the communities that serve, the individuals and the groups and associations that serve communities across our state, whether they be faith, whether they be direct service, whether they be community outreach, whatever they be. Social distancing has made it harder to feel that human person-to-person contact. And it is that work that breeds the empathy that enables us to strive to do better on topics like this of reducing racial and ethnic disparities in the criminal justice system. And I go also to members of law enforcement who have worked every day through this public health emergency, trying to do their best in these times of great uncertainty and concern and risk and health impacts of the public that law enforcement serves. And the fact that you all have put time together to come and convene today, I think speaks volumes to your commitment to this effort. The report, as I said at the beginning, has some positive news that in 2017, as in today's report, ethnic and racial disparities are shrinking regarding the traffic stops that are being analyzed. As you all know, they have not been eliminated, but there is forward progress being demonstrated. And Connecticut has become a national model for how to approach studies and efforts to address racial and ethnic disparities in traffic stops. California, Oregon, Rhode Island are following in our footsteps on ways they can approach this. And when I step back for a minute, I try to, in reading these reports every year and following the advisory board and hearing from the work of IMRP, I think, what are the elements that have made this model successful? And I think that number one is demonstrating that commitment from the passage of the original legislation named in honor of Alvin W. Penn to the further reforms enacted in 2012 and 2013, where major revisions were made, and then that enabled police agencies to begin collecting data pertaining to traffic stops in 2013. I think doing the work is number two, that it took effort. It took blood, sweat, tears, elbow grease, rolling up sleeves, keeping at this work to produce this 5th annual report. You analyze IMRP and advisory board 510,000 traffic stops across our state over a 12-month period from January 1st of 2018 to December 31st of 2018. You're highlighting areas where disparities between races and ethnicities are greatest in traffic enforcement around our state. You're giving us a roadmap for how to improve it. And this is no easy answer. Law enforcement is local. We have 94 municipal police departments in our state. We have 11 distinct troops around our state. We have 13 specialized agencies, but you kept at it, and that's number three, through an advisory group, a diverse interdisciplinary advisory group that did this work to interpret the data, to bring in the qualitative input, and to work together to address these issues. You created an atmosphere of open-mindedness, empathy, and honesty for all stakeholders to come together and talk about topics that have existed with the United States from the founding of our country. And it's a topic that is difficult for many jurisdictions even to address, to acknowledge, and to say nothing of keeping at it year after year, despite the hardship, despite the deep personal pain embedded in the very identity of the people who come to work on these issues. But you found common ground to establish trust through this project between law enforcement and the community to do this work. You charted progress and you strive for greater impact year over year. And I think those are some of the elements that have made it possible to see the successes that you're seeing in today's report on 2018 data, and to come together with the resolve that progress is being made, that racial and ethnic disparities in traffic stops are shrinking, that fewer departments are being covered in the report, that more agencies are showing improvements, more agencies are coming to apply this. And why is this work being done? Obviously, we're thinking about the impact that disparity has on our state, our municipalities, our communities, our families, our people. It's deeply embedded in the factors that are holding back people from achieving the God-given success that they possess. It's also making it challenging for law enforcement to do their work in various ways, and criminal justice agencies. And I applaud law enforcement agencies that have committed to this from the very beginning, others that have read the reports and worked to make improvements, and the law enforcement leaders that are here today, from prosecutors to police chiefs and to many more. For your role in this is a real demonstration within our state and around the country of how this work is aimed at helping law enforcement to do their jobs even more effectively in protecting the public. And I hope those are some of the ways that I can express through a perspective of great humility over what pride it is for me to even be given a few moments of time. I recognize the unending work of my predecessor, Mike Lawler, who stood alongside then Representative Dyson on so many occasions in the legislature. They had a vision at the beginning of this, a vision that began not in 1999 with enactment of that legislation, but many years prior. And I think I want to share with you all that you are pursuing that vision, not just for our state, but for our country. And without further ado, I am eager to hear from the staff at IMRP who worked tirelessly on this, the advisory board members, and many others. There's a chock full information in this report, and I want to give it the justice it deserves so we can delve into the details. Ken, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the chance to share some brief remarks. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to the report.
Hey, thank you very much. Ken?
Yes. Okay.
Are you ready to do your report now?
I am, yes. So thank you, Mark. At this time, I'll give a brief presentation on the findings in the report. Those folks who've been at this for a while, you'll know that these presentations and the previous 4 reports have been sort of academic in nature and lasted a fairly lengthy amount of time. We're trying something new this year, and we're going to try and keep the presentation and the report highlights short. I'm going to try and keep it to less than 10 minutes. I'm trying to condense a 282-page report into a small amount of time. That being said, if there are questions, please write your questions in the chat. We can also take questions at the end. The report is currently now live and available online at www.CTRP3.org. So the report, as of 10 o'clock this morning, is available for download for anybody in the public. With that, I'm going to share a brief presentation and hope that folks are able to see this presentation. Again, just a reminder, if you have questions, you can write them in the chat, and I'll go through the presentation, hopefully in a fairly timely manner. So this is obviously our 5th annual traffic stop analysis. The Connecticut Racial Profiling Prohibition Advisory Board was established in 2012. We've been meeting almost on a monthly basis for the better part of 8 years. Not only as an advisory board, but a number of working groups have come together over the course of the last 8 years to develop both the data collection and analytical system that is becoming that national model. And Marc touched on this in his comments, and I think it's important. That we just spend a few minutes to recognize how far Connecticut has come since 2011, 2012, when the state rewrote the racial profiling statutes. We have built a state-of-the-art data collection and analysis system, and as Marc indicated, it's being replicated in other states. Our approach is actually currently being modeled by the states of California, Oregon, and Rhode Island. We were the first state to implement a screening tool. So typically in the past, when you saw researchers around the country doing this type of work, they would go in, they would identify disparities, they would say to police agencies, you have a problem, and they would walk away. We decided here in Connecticut to take a different, more comprehensive approach. And so rather than simply the identification of departments and leaving them to spin their wheels, trying to figure out what are the factors that could be driving disparities, we developed a screening tool to identify those departments with statistically significant disparities that warrant further analysis. In other words, the conversation doesn't simply end at the identification of disparities. And that is sort of one of the biggest parts of the models that other states have decided to adopt. Since 2015, not only have we conducted 5 statewide analyses, but we've also conducted follow-up analyses on 31 individual police departments. So it's probably been the most comprehensive review of police department data across the country. So in total, we've done 31 reports on 31 individual departments, 5 statewide reports, and 1 3-year analysis. So that's 37 reports that the Racial Profiling Advisory Board and the IMRP have have completed in the last 5 years. I'm going to jump into the analysis now. What's in the report that came out today? It's our annual study of more than 508,000 traffic stops conducted during the 2018 calendar year. And there's also a chapter in the report, which is a comprehensive 5-year analysis of traffic stop disparities for the Connecticut State Police. We'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Just some general stop characteristics. I know sometimes people are interested in just some general descriptive statistics. This year, just under 65% of all drivers stopped were white, 17%, just about 17% were Black, non-Hispanic, 15.2% were Hispanic, and 3.1% were all other races. Just under 63% of drivers stopped were men, 37% were women, 85% of all drivers stopped were residents of the state of Connecticut, 15% lived elsewhere. The age breakdown, we haven't seen too many deviations from this in the last 5 years. 8% are under the age of 20, 29% are between 20 and 30, 22% are between 30 and 40, 17% are between 41 and 50, 15% are between 51 and 60, and 10% are older than 61. The largest share of drivers stopped are under the age of 40. The vast majority of traffic stops in Connecticut are for motor vehicle violations, followed by equipment violations and then investigatory stops. Most stops result in some sort of a warning, either a written warning or a verbal warning, and about 41% of all stops result in an infraction or a citation. 3.2% of all vehicles stopped or searched. That number has remained fairly consistent over the course of the last 5 years. The number one reason for stopping cars in the state of Connecticut in 2018 was once again for speeding, followed by registration violations, defective lighting violations, and cell phone violations. Those registration, defective lights, and cell phone all always vie for second, third, and fourth place in terms of their share of the overall traffic enforcement in the state, and they're all fairly consistent. So we're going to get into the actual highlights from the analysis now. There's a whole chapter in the report which provides a much more descriptive statistics on what types of reasons cars are stopped and where searches are conducted. And so if you're looking for higher level descriptive statistics, that is in chapter 2 of the report. But the bottom line from the analysis this year, this is a quote from the report. The findings from the 2018 analysis of Connecticut's traffic stop data indicate that progress continues to be made in terms of the decision to stop a minority motorist. So the results from the Veil of Darkness analysis, and remember, we use 7 analytical tools to measure racial disparities in Connecticut. The Veil of Darkness methodology is considered the gold standard. It's considered one of the best ways to assess racial disparities in traffic enforcement across the country. And it indicated that a stop motorist this is the second year in a row, was not any more likely to have been a minority during periods of daylight relative to darkness. So again, second year in a row, out of the 5 times we've run this report statewide, that we have not identified any statistically significant disparities using this measure. We did find some marginal disparities for Hispanic motorists being stopped by state police using this measure. Estimates for the aggregate of Connecticut and also all of the 94 municipal police departments together indicated little evidence of disparate treatment in this test. The lack of a disparity statewide and the lower number of identified departments continues to be a promising sign. So not only do we run this test for the state as a whole, for all municipal departments together and state police combined, we also run this test for each of the 94 individual municipal departments. Typically in the past, we've identified anywhere between 4 and 6 departments using this measure. This year, we only identified 1. So again, continuing to see signs of improvement. Statewide disparities are drastically decreased. They're not being identified using this particular measure, and far fewer departments are being identified as outliers. And so again, we only identify 1 municipal department and 1 state police troop using this measure, and we'll get into them in a moment. Excuse me. Across all, we're jumping a bit into the post-stop analysis now. Across all specifications, so always we look at the analysis, we again find strong evidence suggesting that minority motorists, however, are treated differently than white non-Hispanic drivers, even when they're stopped for the same reason. So when we look at, for example, speeding stops, and we try and look at the outcomes of those stops to see if Black drivers, Hispanic drivers, and white drivers are receiving similar outcomes for the same type of stop, we are continuing to see disparities. So again, we continue to find disparities in terms of outcomes of stops, and in particular, we find that minority drivers are more frequently given a warning for the same violations where white non-Hispanic drivers are receiving citations or summons for, but minority drivers are also more likely to be searched as a result of stops. The largest disparity was in stops being made for license and registration related issues, where we were seeing minority drivers were statistically more likely to have those stops end in a warning, and white drivers were more likely to have those stops end in some sort of an infraction or a summons. The statewide, by the way, that's a similar finding that we found in previous years, so that's really hasn't changed much. The statewide hit rate analysis also found statistically significant evidence that police were less likely to be successful when searching a minority driver relative to a white non-Hispanic driver. And again, that's a similar finding from previous years, that minority drivers are disproportionately searched and contraband is found at a lower rate. In general, though, we identified far fewer departments in 2018 relative to prior year studies. If you remember back to the first study we put out in 2015, we had identified 11 departments as outliers. The following year, we identified 10, and we were hovering between 8 and 10 departments being identified a year as being statistical outliers. This year, again, we've seen a decrease in the number of individual departments being identified as outliers. We did identify the Bridgeport Police Department and Troop K as having statistically significant disparities that warranted further analysis. However, in the case of Bridgeport, upon our further review, what we learned was that in early 2018, the Bridgeport Police Department switched to a new records management system, and it caused a number of data inconsistencies that rendered some of their data potentially unreliable. And so this was an issue that we discussed at length with the Racial Profiling Advisory Board back in January. And if you'll recall, we approved a recommendation to do a more in-depth review of traffic stop records for Bridgeport based on their 2019 traffic stop records, so that we knew the 2019 data was clean. So that will be a supplemental report that will be provided in the coming months. So although this year we only formally identified Troop K with statistically significant racial disparities that warranted a further analysis, what we did notice was that in the past 4 reports, the Connecticut State Police, different troops have appeared across different measures of assessing disparities. There are different challenges associated with trying to assess disparities with the state police, because the nature of state police is very different. Not only do they provide traffic enforcement on our major state roads and our major interstate highways, but they're also the primary police enforcement in, I believe, 80 municipalities throughout the state of Connecticut. And one of the conversations we had with law enforcement was that since the state police direct the operation and provide supervision of local constables in a number of communities, and these are officers that aren't hired and they're not trained by the state police, but their data is reported back as if they were state police related stops. There was a concern that these stops from constables could be influencing the racial disparities that are being identified in some of the troops. And in the past, some of the troops that have been more consistently identified have been troops that have a higher constable ratio from some of our more highway-related troops. So the comprehensive state police analysis was intended to further explore this issue. This was a first of its kind comprehensive 5-year analysis of traffic stop disparities for the state police. almost done. 2 more slides, folks. So we looked at troopers versus constables in 2 ways. One is we took, again, that gold standard analytical test, the veil of darkness test, and we reran the analysis with just constables and then just troopers, and we tried to separate out by individual communities where constables might be operating. And the bottom line conclusion is that we didn't find a disparity when focusing on just constables alone. However, when we focused on just state police troopers, the results became more precise and they became larger in magnitude. In particular, the odds that a motorist was stopped was Black or Hispanic increased by 1.1 times for both groups during daylight. And the results were statistically significant at the 99% level. So in layman's terms, what the finding was, the constables are not driving the disparity being identified in the state police data. Same is true for search data. We tried to understand if constables could be playing a role in the outcomes of searches being conducted by state police. And once again, what we found is that the disparity being identified for state police is primarily being driven by the troopers. Part of the reason for that is the small sample size. The sample size gets very small and very imprecise when you separate out constables in both the veil of darkness analysis and the hit rate analysis. So the final slide, I just think it's important to just highlight sort of from our perspective, what are really 2 big lessons that we've learned over the course of the last 5 years as we're meeting this milestone of our 5th annual report. Today, we are now significantly more informed about the factors that drive disparities in policing. Well, I hope we've all learned on the advisory board, and we're asking a number of advisory board members are going to speak to this momentarily. Data is a powerful tool, and it can and it is being used to help make policy decisions and to help make legal changes. And one of the, I've made a number of presentations across the country to other states as they've been looking to implement similar laws. One of the lessons I try and leave them with is slow and steady wins the race. We've been at this now consistently for 8 years. This is the 2nd year in a row that we're seeing significant improvements in disparities being identified here in the state of Connecticut. That didn't happen overnight, and that didn't happen maybe as quickly as folks would have liked. But when you consistently stay focused on an issue and you try and chip away at the problem bit by bit, eventually what you will see is progress is being made. So I hope I can leave you with that sort of that bit of advice. And so with that, I would actually like to, if I can, just ask the other co-author of the report, Jim Fazzalaro, if he could weigh in and provide some comments to us on the findings of the report, and then we'll kick it back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Ken. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, we've been at this for quite a while now, and I think one good way for me to just weigh in on this is to make people aware and remind people that when we were originally designing this system, we were looking to create a screening tool that was reproducible, was not extraordinarily expensive, and that could provide us with an annual snapshot of what traffic stops in the state looked like. We put a lot of effort into that. I think there probably was an expectation that somehow the data was just going to scream out that, you know, things aren't good here, they're all right there. That was never really what we were trying to set up. We were trying to set up essentially what exists right now as the preeminent screening mechanism in use anywhere in the country to look at police traffic stop data. That was an extremely complex learning process for us. And over that period of time, we've made a number of refinements. We've varied our approach to use more apropos kinds of tools, and the system has really evolved to the point now where a lot of the skepticism, I believe, that existed on both extremes of this, at both sides of this particular issue, is starting to melt away, because people see that this is essentially a two-step process. It's not just issuing an annual report that points a finger at police agencies and then just simply stops. What follows the initial report, and what we have worked very, very hard on, and frankly, we don't believe it's done anywhere else in the country, is a very involved process of taking those departments that have been identified and sitting down with them to talk about what they do, to talk about their approaches, to show them what we see in their data, and to engage in a process of both understanding what their policies are, why they do what they do, and then showing them what the data comes back looking like, to try to get to some understanding of why the data is the way it is. And what we've experienced in that process is sometimes it's very clear why disparities are likely to be occurring in traffic data. Sometimes it's not clear. And that's where we bring that information to the agencies for them to do what they believe is appropriate. When we do our analysis, we make them fully aware of what we're looking at, how we're looking at it. We get feedback from them. We ask them for additional data so that we can do comparisons to traffic crash data and their calls for service. We try to map out where stops are occurring to see if disparities are localized in on certain roads or in certain parts of a municipality. And that process, I believe, when you stop and figure that a third of the municipal agencies in the state have gone through that process with us, I believe that process has produced an important product, in the sense that departments have gotten used to the fact that someone is looking at the data. Now, police agencies don't necessarily want people looking at how they do what they do. But what we also realize is that we look at it in ways in which they might not really want to either have the time or have the opportunity to be able to see their own data coming back to them. They look at the number of stops they make. They may be doing things internally to look at, who's the busiest officers and things like that. But what we have frequently come back to them with is information that says, when we look at these particular stops, it seems like this or this or this is driving these disparities. And we begin a discussion with them. And then we leave them with that information. That process is, and the ongoing way in which it works, is the most important achievement, I think, of what we tried to do. This isn't about, for us, pointing fingers and says, data in this town looks terrible, there's something wrong there. That's a gross oversimplification of what we've worked pretty hard to try to establish as an analytical framework for the data. It doesn't mean we don't see things in the data that raise questions in our mind, but it's how we approach dealing with the questions to get what seems to be a better understanding of what could be the issues, that I think is one of the unique achievements of what we've been able to do here in Connecticut that others in other states haven't really wanted to take on. And it's to the great credit of the state of Connecticut and the people who have invested their time and their effort and their thoughts and their emotions in this process, that they've helped to create a process that I believe is starting to show that people are becoming much more sensitive to what goes on in traffic stops and are trying to do the right thing. I think that's important. And it's one of the things that I, as kind of, person who was trying to engineer this whole thing, am the most proud of being able to achieve, because we have a lot of people who are invested in an important issue, and we're doing the kind of work that I think a lot of other places would like to do, but haven't made the kind of commitment that's been made here in Connecticut.
Thank you, Jim. All very important. But this time, you often hear from Jim and I about, the data and the research, but I think now that we've met this milestone of our 5th annual report, and we've been at this a long time, I'd like to turn our attention now to members of the advisory board to share some of their comments from their perspective, from the organizations they represent, about the work that we've done. And so at this time, we've got the agenda up. If you're a member of the advisory board and you're not on the agenda, I'll come to you at the end when we finish with the list. So with that, I'll turn it to Andrew Clark at this point to kick off our advisory board comment portion.
Thank you, Ken. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for background, I direct the Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy, and for full transparency, we're the entity that receives funds from the federal government to be able to do the work that is part of the presentation in the report that's being discussed today. I'm also on the advisory board, so I play a dual role there. And essentially, how I like to view my role in the advisory board is just as a kind of almost like a historian in some way, and trying to keep the bigger picture in mind about our work. And so I'd like to just take a few minutes to talk about that. And, I would echo Chairman Dyson, who, I've worked with now for over 20 years, in that this is a new adventure. For us, we're so used to an advisory board now that's been meeting since, we had our first meeting in March 22nd of 2012, and we've established some really solid relationships, and it just feels a little bit odd to not be in the room with each other, having a conversation, asking how each other is doing, and then discussing the important work that we've all committed ourselves to. And so I'd just like to say it's been an honor to be a part of the advisory board and to meet and work with the people over the years. I think, if we look back to when this originated, yes, the law started in 1999, but we really got involved in 2012, and that's because the federal government being involved with the town of East Haven and entering into the settlement agreement after finding statistical analysis demonstrating that Latino drivers were disproportionately targeted for traffic stops. It was a new administration. Governor Malloy had just been elected. Mike Lawler went from Judiciary Chair to the Marc Pelka's position currently. And one thing that we realized quickly that the administration realized was that funding had never really been provided to do this work since 1999, not substantial and not enough to produce the products that we're looking at today. And so they identified some funding, and in the process of identifying that funding and putting together the grant application, we reached out to members to form, at that point, an ad hoc advisory board, because we knew that we could not do this work alone, that this was a community problem that needed a community solution, and that needed all stakeholders at the table. It needed to be transparent. It needed to be inclusive. We had to have data rather than the anecdote drive the conversation, even though emotion is an important factor in our work. We needed to be deliberate in what we did, but we also had to have the courage and the willingness to take a look at the problem head on and to adapt as necessary. And I think we've done that over the years. And although we have reached a point in the summit, as Undersecretary Pelka mentioned, I don't think any of us by any means think the work is done. And that much of that work, I think, may focus on going back to those community. And we had begun the work of a round of community forums that, fortunately, due to the public health crisis, we've had to slow down. But I think that's the really important work of the future. But I just want to thank the members of the advisory board for working with us on this, for committing their time, their resources, and for also believing in the vision that if we work together, we can help to address this issue and make the state a little bit better than it had been before, and hopefully substantially better by the end of our work. So thank you, Ken, for that opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from other advisory board members.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. At this point, I'll turn to the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association have been active members of the advisory board from the very beginning. And I think it's important that we hear from them. We've got both Chief Neil Dreif and Chief L.J. Fusaro, who represent the advisory board, who are here with us today. And I'd like to provide them an opportunity to provide a comment. And I don't know if one or both of you want to speak, but I will turn it over to you at this point.
Good morning, Ken, and everyone on the call. Chief Dreif and I collaborated on this statement. We also socialized it with some of our other member departments and chiefs that are within our organization. But we want everyone to know that the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association, as well as its member departments, are committed to fair and impartial policing. We'll continue to partner with other members of the Racial Profiling Prohibition Project Advisory Board to study traffic stop statistics here in Connecticut. The latest report makes it clear that there is benefit gained when Connecticut agencies work together to make improvements in public safety matters that are important to Connecticut citizens. The data contained in the report indicates that racial disparities in traffic stops continues to decline. The data collected is reviewed by police chiefs to learn about traffic stop patterns in their communities. And we believe that process has continually matured with more refined analysis and greater follow-up, which continues to be the most valuable part of this process for the agencies identified and for policing in Connecticut as a whole. We strive for continuous improvement of both the process and policing here in Connecticut, while remaining committed to this collaboration, which provides validated data to the partners involved in the communities we serve. It is important to note that disparities in traffic stop data are proof of racial profiling on the part of any individual police officer, unit, or department. As has become more evident in these unprecedented times, racial disparities exist in many different areas of society. And although many departments have been identified as having statistically significant disparities in traffic stops or post-stop outcomes, no department has been found to have engaged in racial profiling. But the CPCA will continue to work with other members of the advisory board to improve the process of understanding and analyzing traffic stop data with the goal of improving our service to the citizens of Connecticut. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief, for those comments. At this point, I'll turn, we've been fortunate for the last number of years. Actually, did Chief Dreif I don't want to cut him off if he.
No, we collaborated on that, so that's what I would have said.
Okay, great, thank you. So at this point, I'm going to turn to Dr. Cato Laurencin, who is a community representative on the advisory board for the last number of years, and is also doing a significant amount of research in the area of health disparities as it relates to racial profiling. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Laurencin.
All right. So first, to my colleagues on the Racial Profiling Prohibition Project Advisory Board, I want to start by congratulating the group for its work on describing the traffic stop analyses and findings. As was just said earlier, the important work, I believe, has involved working with and engaging police departments across the state in understanding the data and making use of it to their benefit and the benefit of the people that they serve. I want to take the opportunity to particularly thank and congratulate Chair Dyson, Ken Barone and Andrew Clark, Chief Dreif, and Tanya Hughes and Cheryl Sharp. I must say I've learned much from you. Now, there's much positive data in the report, but there's still, I think, much to do. First, data show discretionary stops by police, they're sometimes called pretext stops, are twice as high for blacks and whites, with no scientific evidence or information I've seen to justify this difference in rates. The second, while there is more parity across the state in stop data for blacks, Latinos, and whites, and this implies a society that is moving more toward fairness, what is the perception of the people in the community? What is the perception of the people being stopped? Now, why is perception important? As you may know, I recently wrote a paper called Racial Profiling as a Public Health Issue. The paper details the way in which racial profiling, or even the mere perception of racial profiling, can translate to detrimental medical, emotional, and physical effects. As the community member of the advisory board, I wish to advocate for the committee to consider 3 additional steps. I believe we should take the committee legislatively as necessary to 3 new steps. And the 3 steps would answer 3 questions. 1, how does the community feel about its relationship with police? 2, how do those who are stopped by police feel about their experience? And 3, to what extent do police understand the principles of unconscious bias and trauma-informed policing, and effectively use that knowledge to help them work with communities in policing? Many of these steps are paralleled in the medical community. Individuals who have contact with our health providers are polled either after their encounter or yearly to gain their perceptions and perspectives on their experience. I believe we should do the same for law enforcement. We in the medical profession have recognized unconscious bias is real, highly prevalent, and hinders adequate care to Black and Brown people. In fact, COVID-19's effects in the Black community has a portion of its roots in the unconscious bias we see in the medical system. Unconscious bias is also present in policing and should be addressed. We have greatly benefited in gaining perception from our patients. It's not only improved our relationships, but has improved our quality of service and our quality of care. And now finally, I've alluded to the principles of trauma-informed policing. Trauma-informed policing is defined as a framework for police officers to recognize and appropriately address the complexity of trauma experienced by survivors, to acknowledge symptoms and to use response tactics accordingly to prevent further individual trauma. So in sum, I'm honored to be part of this committee for the number of years. I hope we can not only continue the current work, but expand to gain perspectives and input from the community at large, to gain perspectives and input from those who were stopped by police, that we lead in developing statewide approaches to address unconscious bias, and we lead in developing statewide approaches to promote trauma-informed policing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, comments, and some of the areas that you believe we should explore, Dr. Laurencin. And I've made a note of the 3 questions that you posed, and hopefully when we're all back together as a group, we can further discuss those. So,
great, thank you.
With that, I'm going to turn now to Tamara Lanier. She is, I believe, an original member of the Racial Profiling Advisory Board, meeting with us for the last 8+ years, representing the Connecticut NAACP. So Tamara, are you there?
Yes, I've been with the committee now for 8 years, and I am a part of a small remnant of a few people who have been with the committee the entire time. And but for those 8 years, we have been working very hard to not only raise awareness to the fact that racial profiling exists, but also to the important component of reform and police reform. And when we initially started, and I'm just from a historical perspective, from my point of view, when we initially started, I felt that there was somewhat of an adversarial relationship between the stakeholders in the community, the representatives of the community, and law enforcement. And I'm happy to say today that I think that that relationship has changed, and there is an awareness that racial profiling exists, and there is a willingness to come to the table and have a meaningful discussion about reform, and I'm grateful for that. This report is not only a reflection of all the hard work, the years of work that we put into the data, collecting the data, reforming how police departments collect data, analyzing the data. But what for me this report shows by the trending downward is that there are fewer adversarial encounters between the community and the police. And for that, I celebrate that, acknowledging that, I look at it kind of like that's the glass is half full. There are fewer encounters, but there's still more work to be done. We can't live in this moment. We've had 2 reports that are both trending downward, and I'm very excited about that. But again, like I said, we can't take our foot off the gas. We can't live in this moment. We have to continue moving forward. What we're doing is important, it's necessary, and it's reformative. And we have to continue the work. And Andrew has alluded to it a little earlier. I think one of the most important things that we've done recently, or that we've started doing, is engaging the community. For the most part, the community does not have access to the LOB. They don't make it to our meetings, but they have something to say. And what we've learned as we've traveled throughout the state hosting these profiling discussions, they're well attended. The people who are there are passionate about their experiences with police. And it also, I think, for the police departments that participated, was an opportunity for them to connect on a different level with the community. So, I think that however, in this post-pandemic era, I'm hoping that we're moving to, we have to find a way to continue those discussions. They're a very important part of what we do, and it gives the community a voice. And I think in some way, like when I say reformative, not only is it bringing the police departments and the communities together, but policies are changing, practices are changing, and that is ultimately what we strive to accomplish. So we're doing very important work. We can't take our foot off the gas. We got to keep moving forward, and we got to bring the community along with us. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those comments, Tamara. Thank you for being a part of this for the last 8+ years. At this time, I'll turn over to another organization that has participated in this from the very beginning, the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. I know we've got Tanya Hughes. Tanya, I believe you're on the phone. I'm going to unmute you. And we've also got Cheryl Sharp. So I don't know who wants to go first, but I will. Tanya, you're unmuted, by the way. So Tanya and
yes.
Cheryl. Cheryl, you're still muted.
I'll go first.
All right, go ahead, Tanya. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Tanya Hughes. I'm the Executive Director at the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. And as mentioned, the Commission has also been a member of this advisory board since inception. I personally joined the committee in 2013 upon my appointment as Executive Director. And I just wanted to state that the CHRO has a special relationship with enforcement authority in that we investigate complaints of discrimination, including those filed by employees, as well as public citizens in response to complaints of racial profiling. We have designated employees from our legal department who specifically handle complaints of this nature, and working on the board has been somewhat long-suffering, as you've heard, as they say in church, in that we've struggled coming to a consensus about what racial profiling means to us individually and collectively as a group. Nonetheless, we forged ahead, and we've been able to get to a place where all parties at the table have a healthy respect for each other's roles on the board. And more importantly, we've reached a place where we understand each other's positions and perspectives. It's been a long time coming, but as you can see, we're finally starting to see the fruits of our labor through the results in the traffic stop analysis and findings reports. The findings are showing that we're finally moving in the right direction. And because our system of analysis and reporting is being used as a model in other states to implement similar programs, CHRO, as the enforcement authority over matters involving discrimination, is extremely committed to making certain that justice looks the same for all Connecticut residents in all towns and all communities throughout the state, from Ledyard to Norwalk to Thomaston to New Haven. We believe that discretionary authority should not equal privilege for some and conviction for others. And while the results reveal drastic improvements in disparities statewide, until they are completely eliminated, our work is not done. So I cannot underscore that enough. Dr. Laurencin has so eloquently described the effects of racial profiling. So we must now focus on reducing and eliminating racial profiling and unconscious bias. And I'm excited about what our next steps as an advisory board are. And as we formulate to determine how we use this data statewide to improve experiences across the state, I commend all of the advisory board members for your steadfast commitment to reducing racial injustice and disparities through your participation on this board. And I thank Chairman Dyson, Ken, Jim, and the leadership team for your excellent stewardship of this board. It's been a pleasure working with each and every one of you. You've offered an abundance of insight and thoughtful contributions. So let's continue this important work onward and forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Sharp. I'm the Deputy Director at the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, and it is an honor to have served on this working group since 2012. I was at the first meeting, and it was provocative then, and it continues to be. I want to thank IMRP for all of their diligence and hard work in bringing light to a very serious issue within our state and helping us to get to a better place. I also want to thank the police department and departments of public protection for their engagement and their insight. It has sometimes been a pleasure and other times been a struggle, but all in all, there's, like the executive director of our agency has already articulated, a healthy respect for each other's perspectives. And I think that that is important. And I just want to echo what Tamara Lanier said from the NAACP. This is reformative, and it's also restorative. Our work is not done. We will continue to work hard to ensure that there is equality and equity in the traffic stops that occur. As the enforcement agency, we have seen complaints. Complaints have continued to be filed with us, alleging discrimination in traffic stops. However, there does seem to be an indication that we have turned the corner, which is really inspiring for us as a civil rights agency. IMRP has done some excellent work in this area, and so I won't belabor the point, but thank you so much. It has been certainly a pleasure and an honor to work with each and every one of you.
Thank you so much for those comments, Tanya and Cheryl. We actually have a number of original members of the advisory board: Tamara, Cheryl, Andrew. Next is also an original member of the advisory board, Mike Gailor, State's Attorney, Middletown, but he's been representing the Connecticut Chief State's Attorney's Office for the past 8 years. So, Mike, I believe you're user 7 on the phone. I just unmuted you.
Okay, I want to thank Ken and the staff at IMRP for the work on this matter. I also want to thank Commissioner Dyson for his Chairman Dyson for his leadership. I also want to thank the police departments, both state police and local police, for their contributions, both in helping set up this process and in compiling the data over the course of the year. This procedure would not work if the police did not collect the data and get it to the folks, Ken and his folks, so that they can do the proper analysis. I think the report highlights that we are making progress here. And I think it's important to recognize that that progress could not be made but for the collaboration of everybody involved in this. The police, the public, the ACLU, the NAACP, the community groups, the public defender's office, the state's attorney's office, everybody getting together and working on this to address the problem has really, you can really see the benefits of that now. From the very beginning, what I've seen is people digging in and trying to figure out how we're going to address it. We had some disagreements along the way, trying to figure out what the proper method was, but from the very beginning, what I saw was a commitment to address the issue. And I think you're seeing the benefits of that now. So I just want to thank, on behalf of the state's attorneys, the chief state's attorney, everybody who's been involved with this from the beginning. Those people came in later. But I actually think we're seeing the results of that now. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Werner.
Thank you for having us. I was also an original member of the advisory group in different capacities. I was directing the Latino and Puerto Rican Affairs Commission. And as a matter of fact, I was in the legislature working in the Senate. And I met Senator Penn back when he was alive. And I saw and worked with Chairman Dyson when he was the chair of appropriations. So I think for me to hear the status of this report this year as a great story. I know that there's so much work to be done in the future. So I am ready to roll up my sleeves and continue to work with the advisory group together to make some additional improvements. I really want to thank Andrew and Ken and the advisory group for the research that they've done. When the legislation was originally adopted, the work of this research was given to the African American Affairs Commission, which was a legislative agency within the Connecticut General Assembly. And unfortunately, the staff of that commission did not have the research capability to actually look at that data in the way that it has been conducted at Central under the leadership of Andrew Clark and Ken Barone. So I know that that we have changed the legislation in order to make the appropriate review and an analysis that needed to be done. So I think that that's great that occurred, so that the report is and the data it's valuable for policy making, and so I think that needed to be said. In addition to this comment, I have a couple of questions. One of which goes to the finding of this report, which included Troop K. So two questions. Number one, have you guys at Central met with the leadership of Troop K to find out what has happened? And number two, I know in past reports, Wethersfield was also identified. My question for the advisory group leadership is what happened to make Wethersfield not to be included in this report, to see what they've done better to make some improvements. So those are my two questions that I have.
Sure, Werner. So I'll just try and take those, and then I'll circle back to Rashad if Rashad has audio. First, let me say, Werner, thanks for wearing the CCSU shirt. So that's good promotion. Thank you. As far as the State Police Troop K, we've had a number of meetings with State Police over the course of the last year, looking at and addressing both Troop K and the other troops that have been consistently identified. Our research this year predominantly focused on whether or not constables could be driving disparities, because Troop K and Troop C in particular are both troops with high numbers of constables. They're constables being usually like more local officers that are overseen by state police. And so we spent a significant amount of time trying to explore that with state police. We've also set up a number of other State Police posed another additional questions, and we posed additional questions to them of other things that we'd like to explore since we ruled out the trooper versus constable piece. So we ruled out constables driving the disparity. So we're still trying, and we did a fairly comprehensive report a few years ago on state police where we ruled out, for example, their participation in NHTSA-funded campaigns as some of the factors that could be driving disparity. So I would say that our work with state police is ongoing. The way we left it with state police when we last met before the pandemic, we met right before the pandemic hit, and we had to sort of stop meeting in person. There's a series of additional things that we're going to continue to explore with state police. So don't think that the conversation ended with, okay, there are disparities, but it's not constables. And so we're going to keep meeting and keep sharing our findings and keep doing additional research on state police until we have some additional answers. As far as the question regarding Wethersfield, Wethersfield, this is the first year where Wethersfield was not identified in, as you know, we use 7 statistical tests. And we're identified in some of the measures, but not the most significant measures, that veil of darkness methodology, which is the gold standard, and also the synthetic control test, which is sort of the silver standard, if you will. Part of it as a result of a reduction in the total number of traffic stops. And so their sample sizes have gotten smaller. They continue to show up as the #1 town for disparities in our more descriptive measures. We did receive a grant from the state of Connecticut, a small grant, to be able to do a specific research project just on Wethersfield and to do a full comprehensive 6-year analysis of Wethersfield. And so we're using that as an opportunity to be a model for advancing some of the follow-up work we do. Our research team has a deadline of June 1st to have their proposal put together for how they would go about modeling that additional analysis for Wethersfield. And then come July 1, they'll start, and they have about 6 months to publish, to conduct their research and publish that report. So we haven't ended the conversation on Wethersfield. I know, the way we left it was that we were going to continue to look at and understand disparities in that community. And we're taking a different approach. And so as soon as we have the model for how we're going to further explore them drafted, we'll share that with the advisory board and accept feedback at that time. Okay, hopefully that answers your questions, Werner. We do have a question I do see from Dave Collins from the AP, but before I respond to that, I just want to know, Rashad, are you there and were you able to get audio at all?
I've come on the board within the past, say, 2 years, so obviously I'm not one of the original members, but I did reach back in the person on the board before me from our division, Deborah Sullivan. She did have some comments she wanted to relay as well. And she wanted to state that she really appreciates the partnerships that were created through the board and the collaboration that resulted, and that everyone contributed to the conversation and listened to the views of others, even if they did not always agree. And she commends everyone for working so hard on the issue that we work on. And my sentiment, having been on this board for almost 2 years at this point, are very similar to what hers are. I believe that this body does work hard. A lot of us don't even necessarily get to see how the sausage is made as far as entering the data and then doing the analysis. We just see the final report and then make our conclusions based on that. So there's a lot of work that we don't even see. And I want to commend everybody who participates in that aspect of it as well. And also, I think it's important to note that we did report, we make our recommendations and that, but the police departments that do come under notice, when they actually engage and take the work seriously, I think that's when we really start to see the benefits. And I think that the downward trend is also a good thing. And we're certainly not out of the woods yet. and I don't think anyone in this board is going to thinks that we should rest on our laurels, but instead continue the progress that's being made. And I think a good step in continuing with that progress is taking seriously the issues that Dr. Laurencin has brought to bear. And I think we've done a lot of good work. And even prior to me coming on board, I think good work was done in the past, and good work will continue to be done. And it's been an honor to be on this board. And I think everyone should be both proud of the work that they've done and also be energized and ready to move forward. And those are my comments at this time.
Thank you so much for that, Rashad. And I think we've now heard from most members that are on the call from the advisory board. And so if for some reason I missed you or you have nothing to add, please feel free to chime in. With that, I'm going to turn my attention just to the question we have. If you're on the call and you have a question and you want to write it in the chat box, that's fine. Also, if you'd like to ask your question in person, you can write in the chat box, I have a question, and we'll call on you. That might be the best way to manage this. So the question that we currently have is from Dave Collins from the AP. And he says the percentage of Black and Hispanic drivers stopped by police statewide in 2018 was again higher than the percentage of Black and Hispanic people of driving age in the general population. The percentages are about the same as those in 2017, but higher than those in previous years. Can someone please address the significance of that data? A few things to note. The overall number of the number of traffic stops has been declining as a state since we first started this initiative 5 years ago, analyzing data 5 years ago. We're down close to 100,000 traffic stops in the state of Connecticut. Most of that we've addressed at previous advisory board meetings is almost entirely being driven by a reduction in traffic stops being made by the Connecticut State Police. And so we know that Connecticut State Police are down a significant number of troopers. And so their ability to make as many traffic stops as they did 6-7 years ago has been significantly diminished. And so that's driving the number of traffic stops down. It's also impacting the overall percentages, descriptive statistics that we present in our report. So the actual number of Black and Hispanic drivers being stopped is declining, but not in proportion with the way the number of white driver stops are declining. And part of that is because historically state police have stopped a higher percentage, a higher number of white drivers, which would dilute sort of the Black and Hispanic percentages from previous years. That being said, we have, for the most part, shied away from doing a simple comparison to census data for drawing or making any major conclusions on, because the nature of policing varies fairly significantly. We see that the volume of traffic stops varies from one community to another. So, for example, New Haven is one of our more active agencies participating, conducting traffic enforcement with, close to 15,000 traffic stops a year, but might have a neighboring town like Madison who conducts, 4,000 traffic stops a year. So where traffic enforcement is occurring at higher rates is some of what drives the general descriptive disparity to be a little bit larger. We tend not to draw any conclusions or read too much into the general descriptive statistics, but we try and rely on our more sophisticated analytical methods like the veil of darkness methodology to tell us whether or not the disparities are statistically significant. So your understanding of the data, Dave, is correct. The percentages are greater than the general population percentages, but that tends not to be how we analyze data. And as you'll see, it's consistent with previous years. Most of the reason why it's up from previous years is as a result of the declining number of traffic stops being contributed by state police. So with that, I hope I answered your question. If not, chime back in. I've got Ryan Lindsay, I believe, from NPR, who also had a question. So Ryan, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself, and feel free to ask.
Can
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, wait, hang on. I'm sorry, Ryan. I think Jim just wanted to, from the project staff, just wanted to also respond to Dave's question. Then I'll turn back to you. Sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, just a little further about the question that Dave had. It's important to note that that 15% of all the stops that are made in the state of Connecticut are made of people who don't live in Connecticut. So trying to compare the total percentage of stops to the total local residents in certain demographic groups is not a great comparison. So that's a variable that we don't really have a good idea of what the demographics of out-of-state drivers traveling through the state who get stopped, but there are 15% of all the stops, and those tend to be more state police in terms of total number. So it does affect the data that way. The other thing we have no way of really being able to address is, especially with regard to Connecticut residents, is how many multiple offenses individuals have. We have no way of really knowing that from the data, so that you may have people, and certainly that's more likely on a local level, who have very high levels of enforcement in areas that they live or frequent, that are exposed to a traffic stop more than one time. So it's not you can't really look at it as a one-to-one relationship because it has those kinds of complicating factors. And there are limits to what we can tell from the data. One of which is we don't know, when we see the data, how many times that might involve someone who's been stopped 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. I'm going to turn it now over to Ryan Lindsay from Connecticut Public Radio for your question. Thank you.
Okay, bear with me as I try and articulate it, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So it was on page 15 of the PDF, but it was talking about, I think, 8 cities and towns. So Darien, Manchester, Meriden, Newington, Stratford, Waterbury, and Wethersfield, that exceeded the disparity threshold in more of half of the benchmark areas. Are those benchmark areas the 3 that were detailed before that, or is that based on sort of those 7 tests that you all have? And then in addition to that, can you sort of explain how those 8 towns differ? Are they not showing up for the veil of darkness?
Good question, Ryan. So what you're referring to, again, we run 7 different tests to assess racial disparities. 3 of those tests we lump together and call them descriptive statistics. They're tests that are fairly easy to understand. They've been used for a long time. It's comparing to the statewide average estimated driving population of resident-only stops. And so those towns that you identified, they were identified using those descriptive measures. Being identified with significant disparities in the descriptive tests alone does not get you to be identified for further analysis. So it has to be a combination of the descriptive tests with one of the more sophisticated statistical tools that we use. And so those departments, if you look at the results from the descriptive measures from previous years, have been fairly consistent. You can score a total of 9 points in the matrix you put together on page 31 of the report. If you identify at more than half the points, 4.5 or more, that gets you identified in the matrix. Wethersfield, Stratford have pretty much been first and second in that matrix for a number of years. And it's the note I made previously, which is that, yes, Wethersfield continues to have disparities. They did not show up on the 2 more sophisticated statistical tests. And a lot of that has to do with the power of the data, meaning the sample size shrank. And so our ability to get a more precise result, in the case of Wethersfield at least, was diminished because of the sample size shrinking. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And then also, is it okay if I ask another?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was looking at table 5.1 and just wondering what the significance or what's of note about the net stop percentage compared to the net driving age.
Yeah, so that's in the statewide average comparison. So Ryan, why don't we do this, just because I know we're honing in on an hour and a half on the call. I do have one other question I want to address. Can we connect and I can go through sort of what all this means afterwards? I'll be available, by the way, for any reporters that have some of these technical questions, and I can walk through these charts with you. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'll give you a call for sure. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan. Marc Pelka did ask, let's see, has the traffic stop project ever summarized how addressing past reports findings have helped law enforcement manage policing resources more efficiently and effectively through their work with this project? Along with the project goals of eliminating racial and ethnic disparities, I'm wondering if other benefits with this work has had law enforcement have been documented yet. So really good comments, great comments and questions, Marc. As folks are aware, we have done follow-up analyses on 31 individual departments in Connecticut, and we have learned so much from those findings and from those discussions. And we've learned even more about not only factors that could be driving racial and ethnic disparities, but also about tools that are used that are or are not effective policing tools. And so, right, the classic example we always use is the department that was doing significant defective lighting enforcement as a tool for addressing drinking and driving. And it turned out that that tool wasn't all that effective in finding drunk drivers, but there were other tools that were more effective. And so what the department learned in that case was how to, what tools they could use to be more effective at addressing drinking and driving in their community, as an example. Same is true with communities we've gone in where we see certain traffic enforcement tools being used as a crime reduction strategy. And when we're able to measure how effective it is as a crime reduction strategy, both us and the department are learning how effective that is. And in some cases, it's not as effective as they had anticipated. And so we've worked with them to retool and to think differently about what it is that they can do to address the crime or disorder problem that they're trying to manage. And so I think that's a really good point, that the project itself has been used for more than just addressing racial disparities, but what it's evolved in, particularly that follow-up process, is also helping police to look at data in ways that they hadn't traditionally looked at data before. And we've always, in our conversations that Jim and I have had with law enforcement, we always ask the police administrators to lay out for us what their crime enforcement strategy is or what their traffic enforcement strategy is. And then we try and find ways to take the data that they've provided to us to help them measure whether or not they're achieving the success as they see it. And we try and get them to set the benchmarks for what success is. As far as documenting that work, a lot of that work is documented more sporadically in the follow-up reports. We actually recently wrote an academic paper that's been submitted and accepted by a Criminal Justice Academic Journal that's going to be published later this summer, where we tried to do just that. We felt like we were, as a project staff and as researchers, we were learning a lot about what the data has been telling us, and we felt that we needed to capture that in a way that would benefit both us, other states, and law enforcement. And so that paper itself is fairly concise. It's being edited as we speak, and as soon as that paper is ready, I will make sure I share it with the advisory board so you can share it with your networks and with law enforcement, because I think it helps to consolidate some of the lessons we've learned over the course of the last 8 years. So thank you for the question, Marc, and I hope I addressed it.
And Ken, let me just add one thing to what you said. Part of the process, the follow-up process, is when we sit down with the departments, and we sit down, it might be other municipal officials that are involved, and they raise questions, and this has happened a number of times, where they think one particular thing or one particular employment center has some significant effect on their data. And we will listen to them, and we go back in and we look and we try to isolate to the best extent possible whether or not that assertion has some validity to it. And there have been a few examples in the past that when we were looking into that, we determined that and went back to them and said, look, you're right in to an extent. You know, what you're bringing up has an effect on your overall numbers, but it doesn't have as significant an effect as you believe that it does, because when we compared and isolated those numbers from their general numbers, they still had disparities. So what they were perceiving as the reason why it existed was a partial reason why it existed, and we were able to discuss that with them, and why even if you isolated all of those stops and took them out of the data, there still was a disparity beyond that. So part of those kinds of things, they will come up in the follow-up discussions, and I think most departments that have worked with us have would say, at least hopefully they say, that we're very responsive to points that get raised in the discussions, because we want to produce as accurate a narrative as possible. And to us, it's important to look at things that are brought up on the local level and say, so that we can sit down with them and say, well, you know, you're right, this really does contribute, or it doesn't contribute as much as you might think it does. And they get a better understanding of the dynamics in their own community. At least we hope they do.
Thank you. And I think, you know, one of these days I'm going to be better at estimating the amount of time it's going to take us to do these events. I had in my head it would be 45 minutes, but hey, you know, I guess I was wrong. So with that, it looks like we've honed in on both time and questions. I'd like to turn it back to Chairman Bill Dyson to provide us with some closing comments and some closing thoughts, if I could. So, Bill, if you're there, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I wish all of you could be where I am, and that is to sit and just listen to the comments made by the people who made comments. And you have been able to encapsulate all the work that has been done, and that you arrived somewhat at the similar conclusions. And I think that's excellent. That's very good. I'm also extremely impressed with the attempt on the part of all participants involved to reach out to each other. And that is so monumental, that we are able to reach out and have a desire and a will to want to reach out, to engage others as we're about the business of trying to rectify and do as best we can to make things better for the people who live in our society. Now, I thought it was just so apropos. It was so on target when Dr. Laurencin talked about the stuff that he's been working on. And that brings us to just where we are now as it relates to this meeting itself and what has impacted our coming together the way that we have, and what work needs to be done in the future, and how it is so similar that maybe now the situation we're in will open the eyes of many of us, that we don't have time to engage in the nitpicking, if you will, because there's such a major work that needs to be done. Unconscious bias. Now, if COVID-19 is not in that category of being unconscious stuff as it relates to the delivery of health care for all, and gee, it's amazing. And I think what we get out of this is that it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible that a lot of eyes will be opened by virtue of witnessing what has taken place today. And that is so significant because it's about life itself. And I think that we all embrace the totality of what this is, you know, that we don't have the luxury nor the time to engage in stuff that does not impact upon changing and altering the way things have been taking place and try and make them better. And I think we can do that. I think we can do that. We can demonstrate to everybody else. Look what they've done. They have sat down and engaged in dialogue, had their ups and downs, but they're able to come to the table and be supportive of each other. And that's the thing that I think is so compelling with the work that we do. That is that there's more to be done. It's not that similar than the work that we've already done. People know what that is. They've already identified what those issues are. And they're about the business of learning how to reach out to others. So I've just been so pleased with what I've heard today, the people participating in it, the conditions under which we live today, and that it changes a lot of things, you know. What we're doing today, and I don't mean just our report here, but what we're doing today and functioning in the society in which we are functioning today and making the adjustments we need to make in order to carry on. And man, I'd love to give you the example, and I will. Let me give you the example, and I'll shut up here. My class, I have a class of students, about 30 of them, and I feel so badly for them because they are experiencing something in their life, and we've had nothing to come close to that. And they are dealing with it probably most times all on their own. All on their own. And it's scary. It is scary for them. And if you think of it in terms of being scary for them, go up the ladder and find the adults, the parents and the like. And they have got to be without answers and just as scared too. So it's demanded of us that we work together to try to find remedy to the issues that we've been confronted with. I want to thank everybody for your participation and involvement and all that you've done to make this work. And I know with Ken and Andrew and everybody else there, and I know I don't call everybody's name, but I can't see faces, you know, and it's hard. You know, I want to call out Tamara's name. Dr. Laurencin, you know, and Michael is there. Cheryl, I've got to always needle Cheryl, you know, she drives us, how you doing, man? You know, I'd always ask that question. He and I know what that is. When I say, how you doing, man? I think we have something here that we just need to continue to build on. And thanks for being here. And that concludes my remarks. And then let's get something else, Ken.
No, that's it. Thank you, everybody. And just remember, the report is currently available online, CTRP3.org. If you're a member of the media and you're participating, feel free to give me a call. My contact information is available online and was also part of the press release that went out, and I'll try and answer any of your technical questions about the report. And with that, that's it. Thank you so much, everybody, for spending your morning with us.